start that. Anyone have any questions or concerns from what we went over yesterday before we get into today? Anything that would prevent you from having a good learning experience today that we really need to touch on before we go into the material for today? No? Awesome. Okay, that's excellent. That makes me very happy. All right, here is our package for today. Can everybody see my screen?
Yes.
Yep. All right. Thank you. Thank you. All right. So today we're going to go over the listing agreement package. So yes, buyers are generally who we work with first when we get into real estate. And so that's why we went over the buyer package yesterday. And we all will aspire to be listing agents. There's a saying, list to last, right? One of the reasons for that is you can physically be working with one buyer at a time. You can only be showing that one buyer a house where you can have multiple listings on the market at the same time working for you, right? So it's about leverage. It's about being able to maximize your time, and you can do more with listings than buyers. So agents, in most cases, aspire to be those listing agents and have someone help them with buyers. Our exclusive right to sell listing agreement is fill in the blank, just like our buyer agency agreement was. The ABA and cybersecurity and DPOR long form are the exact same forms we went over yesterday, so we're not going to go over those in detail. We do have a one-page disclosure form from DPOR. Useful information is the same as what we went over yesterday. The lead-based paint disclosure, listing amendment, and optional information forms are going to be new for us. Okay, and that supplemental information sheet that I sent yesterday that has all of the brokerage information is what you would use on these documents as well. All right, everybody good so far? Let's see if I can actually see some of your faces in my screen. All right, so exclusive right to sell listing agreement. This is, again, the date made on between the seller and the broker. The seller is a little different from how it's the backwards version of what we did yesterday with the buyer. The buyer yesterday, we said put their name as they will take title, right? So their full legal name as they would take title. Well, here, the seller, we put the name as it's already on title. Okay, so one of the reasons that you see in command that I require the copy of the tax record is because I verify that the name that's listed here as the seller is actually the name on the tax record. And there are little things that will alert me to say, hey, this might not be every owner. This might not be the right owner. This might not be the right name. And we'll need to do listing amendments or corrections or things like that. Okay. For example.
Yes. Okay.
Oh, is there a question?
I do have a question, but I'm going to let you finish. Maybe you'll answer it.
Okay. So if it's someone who has a home that's owned in a business, an LLC, right? The seller name goes here as the business or LLC, exactly how it's on title, right? And then they sign as the representative. So we used the example yesterday as SML Homes, right? If I owned it in my business, it would say SML Homes as the seller, and then I would sign as the representative. We see a lot these days of homes that are owned in trusts, right? So it'll show the top line of the tax record as the trustee's name. And then underneath, it's going to say like a company name or a business name, and you can tell that it's owned in a trust. So what goes in the seller name is the complete legal name of the trust, and then the trustees sign on behalf. If you have a husband and wife or two joint tenants as ownership, or whatever the case may be as multiple owners, they all would be listed here and they all would have to sign. So I also do look at the tax record to see if it lists two people and only one is listed as a seller. I'm going to want to know why. There are some cases where it's a divorce situation and maybe there was a quitclaim deed and it hasn't been updated. Well, I'm going to want to see proof of that quitclaim deed so that I know that we are entering into this agreement with all parties that are decision makers, right? That are legal owners. We're not able to just take their word for it, right? We have to actually have proof if it doesn't match what the public records are. Alicia, does that answer your question or did that give you more questions?
Yeah, no, not quite. So, because I'm going to get very specific. So I do actually have a client who, she's divorced her husband and remarried. She got the house in the divorce and it has her other name on it, right? So she's since remarried and has a different last name. So you want here the name on the deed.
Yes. So
and then
the name on the
what happens?
And then she signs as her legal name. Right. So if she never updated the deed to show her new name, then she still has to be listed as the seller as her maiden name. So my maiden name is Mulroney. So it would say Shannon Mulroney, right, as the seller, if that's what it says on the deed. And then I would sign as Shannon Lauterstein, and I would provide a copy of my marriage certificate and my updated social security card and those types of things for title to show that I'm who I am, right? That I'm actually, right, because I can't sign in a version that's not me, right? I have to be able to verify my signature. But yes, the maiden name, whatever name's on there. And that happens regularly.
I would need to ask her for that, right? I would need to ask her for her marriage certificate.
Yeah, and the marriage certificate is really what's going to be the most helpful for our purposes. And then the title company may ask for additional information, but at a minimum, they will ask for the marriage certificate.
And additional question: her husband is not on the deed, her new husband, and so he would not even be considered on this listing agreement. Is that what I'm hearing?
That's correct, because he is not an owner. That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Good question. Okay.
To the transaction.
So the next section is for the appointment of the broker, right? It's just saying that we're being hired, right? The property. So in real estate.
For a second?
Sure.
Over here in Springfield, we're working on a client where the husband has died and both names are on the title.
So there could be a situation in that case where there's a type of ownership called tenants by the entirety, whereby a husband and wife both own fully a property, and it's only allowed for husbands and wives. So if one of the spouses passes away, it automatically goes to the other if that's how title is held. So it could be a situation where if they owned it as tenants by the entirety, then just the remaining spouse can go on the agreement because that's who the owner is, and you would need a death certificate for the other spouse.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Ma'am Shannon,
Yes.
I have similar question for my listing. This house is a husband and wife for title name, and never ever come for bride MLS for this listing. This is first time listing, but wife is dead 2 years ago, and husband have for death certificate. Now, when we do for bride MLS listing, we can put only husband name, or both of them we can put for a name.
So the wife passed away 4 years ago?
2 or 3 years ago, and he have for death certificate. So this house never ever coming on market, never ever listing.
Right.
So when we listing, we put only husband name, or we need to put both of them name.
Okay, so only the person who legally owns it is who goes on here, right? So it could, in this case, I don't want to complicate you guys too much, but it doesn't automatically go to the surviving spouse. It depends on how title was held. So if there is someone who's passed away and there is a death certificate and there is an automatic transfer, so right of survivorship somehow, either through joint tenancy or tenants by the entirety, really what should happen is that surviving spouse should be recording that death certificate at the courthouse to update the deed to show that it's just the sole owner of the property before you move forward with anything. It can happen in conjunction with the sale. That's not going to prohibit the sale from happening. But what should happen is that deed should be recorded as part of any estate or probate or just gathering the details to finalize any of the deceased parties' items. Okay, so what I would say is reach out to the title attorney and have the title attorney pull the chain of title and see whether it's been updated and have that recorded before you go on the market. That would be my suggestion in that. Okay, and that way there's no confusion once it goes under contract, but only the name of who actually owns it. So here's where I didn't want to make it complicated for you, but I'm just going to give you an example. If two parties own a property, so let's say my brother and I owned an investment property, okay? We just owned it as tenants in common, right? We didn't own it with right of survivorship. What that means is that if he passed away, he could leave his interest to his heirs. It doesn't mean that I automatically get it. It means that he could leave his half of it to other people. And so then I would own it with people from his estate or his heirs. So it's not an automatic. And that's why we talk about having these things taken care of before going on the market. Okay?
Thank you.
Absolutely. All right, so property address, legal description, MLS description, section number 2. All right, we're going to use the tax record from Bright MLS to fill out a lot of what we do on our listing agreements. So we already talked about verifying the seller name in the tax record. Property address, we're going to pull from the tax record, obviously. Legal description is super, super, super important when we are dealing with real estate. Real estate transfers via legal description. It does not transfer via property address. Property address is something that was put together by the United States Postal Service. When it comes to transfer of land, it has to do with legal descriptions. So please be aware that both pieces of information are equally as important when we are filling out documents. Tax map and ID number, these are two different numbers. So when you see tax map / ID number in the tax record, there will likely be two different numbers. And so you'll put the tax map number / the ID number because it is asking for both. Parking space number. Parking spaces are only assigned numbers when it comes to these agreements if they are deeded with the property. So that means that a homeowners association that has townhouses or a condo association that has assigned spaces that have numbers out in front of the property, those don't get put here because those don't belong to the property. Those are actually common area elements that belong to the HOA or condo association. They are not deeded with the property. Some condo associations do have spots that are for sale where the spot can be owned by one of the unit owners. In that case, it gets a parking spot number on these documents. But if it simply is a regular homeowners association where the HOA has assigned parking space numbers, that does not go here because the property owner itself has no control over those parking spaces.
Okay, Shannon, that was going to be my question. So in townhomes, when MLS says 2 assigned spaces, here we don't put anything, we leave it blank.
Yeah, a townhouse, in almost every scenario, a townhouse, you do not put the parking space number.
Okay.
because it does not belong. It's assigned, but it's part of the community amenities that are assigned, not something that's owned by the home.
Interesting.
If there's a case where there's a townhome not an HOA, how would you discover the parking spaces associated with it?
Same
Would it be
way.
the deed?
Would that be like in DC, maybe? Where would
Virginia.
give me an example of where there would be a townhome that's not in an HOA?
It's actually the house I just purchased. There's like a dispute with, and I can take this offline if it's a side conversation, but the HOA is next to it, but there's a set of homes in between the main road and the HOA where they're not part of the HOA. And there's kind of a little dispute between kind of what the actual like curb space ahead of my house would be, if it would actually be like HOA owned or if it's my own personal property and like I can park in front of it. So it's a little bit of a unique circumstance.
Yeah, let's talk about that, because generally townhomes, because they have common elements, there is something governing the townhomes themselves because of the common elements of the walls and everything. So that's interesting that that one little section wouldn't be. So I would look forward to looking into that with you, because there may be something deeper there.
Okay, yep, sounds good.
MLS description, number of levels, is there a basement, what's the basement type? These are some guidance pieces for you to be looking at when you are taking the listing, so that you know what it is that you're putting into the MLS as far as advertising. So how many levels is the property? Basement is below grade, right? So it's not, if it's all above grade, then none of it's a basement. So if you walk in, if it's what I refer to as a slab house, right, where it's on concrete and it's above, that's not a basement. Basement type would be walk out, walk up. Access only. Type of exterior, you're going to talk about whether it's brick front, whatever, and if there's disability access. Client's address, and then we put in our brokerage contact information, and then we need a term of the agreement, right? We need an actual date that the agreement expires. If the property goes under contract, so it's ratified before that expiration date, the expiration automatically extends until closing, so you're covered. You do not have to do a listing amendment. You do not have to do any type of documentation to extend this agreement if you were under contract prior to that expiration date.
How long do you usually
Listing
put the
price.
term?
It really depends on the client. It depends on where the property is. It depends on what, how reasonable they are on pricing. I mean, I know some people who go on listing appointments in the fall for people that want to go in on the market in the spring, right? So you would put, that would be something that's maybe 6 months out, right? So you're putting a date there, right? So it's all about the date. It's not a number of days. It's about the date. So it's all about timing specific to your clients. Seller instructs broker to offer the property for sale at a selling price of blank or such other price as agreed upon later by seller. Okay, so this gets very complicated, which it doesn't need to be, because if you're doing a listing appointment right now for something that's going in the market in June, if you don't have a price here, you don't have an enforceable agreement. You don't have an agreement at all if you don't have a price. You cannot put TBD. So there are many occasions where our clients and our agents stop reading at the end of the line where it's blank to put in a price. But it says, or such other price as agreed upon later by seller. So it's already saying, hey, we might have to change this price, but this is going to be our target for right now. So what you do is you put in a price that's either your target for later or what you would list it for if you went on the market right now. Does that make sense to everybody? If you're going to change the price, then you do a listing amendment, which I'm going to show you that document towards the end, how you do a listing amendment to change the price. I have had huge success in talking to my clients about pricing when I have listed homes and said, look, I don't print price on my brochures or flyers or any of my marketing material because I am watching the market up until we go live. And if I can suggest an increase in your price, we're going to increase your price. And if we need to decrease your price, then we're going to decrease your price because we need to position you in the best possible way. So they understand. We set the expectation up front. We have the conversations. All right, conveyances. Conveyances is a section that I'm going to read to you. You guys know that I don't like reading the documents. However, this is one that I'm going to read. Property includes the following personal property and fixtures, if existing: built-in heating and central air conditioning equipment, plumbing and lighting fixtures, sump pump, attic and exhaust fans, storm windows, storm doors, screens, installed wall-to-wall carpeting, window shades, blinds, window treatment hardware, smoke detectors and heat detectors, TV antennas, exterior trees and shrubs. Now listen to this next part. Unless otherwise agreed to in writing, all surface or wall-mounted electronic components do not convey. However, all related mounts, brackets, and hardware do convey. All right, let's stop for a second. I'm even going to stop sharing my screen for a minute. This is one of the most confusing pieces of our sales contract, and it's exactly what's in the listing agreement. So I want to make sure we take a minute to talk about this. A fixture is something that is attached to the property, right? It becomes a fixture once it's attached to the property, and it does not stay as considered personal property. So we look at the components, right, for the electronics. And there is a lot of confusion when buyers will see something that is, you know, hanging from the ceiling. They'll see a projector that's hanging from the ceiling and they'll say, oh, it was there, it should convey. Well, whatever brackets are holding, have to be very specific in our conversations about that, okay?
You're freezing, Shannon.
Yeah, I saw that. The window blinds and window.
You're freezing, Shannon.
Yeah, I know it's hard when you guys say that because if I'm frozen, I can't hear you. No, I just switched to one of our different internet connections. Hopefully it'll be a little better. So when you have blinds and shades, they have brackets that are actually attached to the property, right? It's one unit, but window treatments are considered curtains. So curtains do not convey. Any rods that are one piece that are actually attached would convey. If the rod comes off of the bracket, the rod doesn't convey, but the bracket does convey. Anything that's actually attached to the property conveys. So it's very, it gets very confusing when it comes to the electronic components and the window treatments, because people don't understand that window treatments are curtains. And I am going to ask that we update that on our documents to actually say curtains. And when it comes to the electronic components, it would have to be something that was built in to the home. So some homes have systems, speaker systems that are actually built in, right? Where in the ceiling is the speaker and it's all hardwired throughout the house. That would be an automatic conveyance because it's all hardwired through the house and everything, and it's built in. It's not a surface mounted component. All right. Who has questions about that? Does that make sense to everybody now about what the expectation is and how to have that conversation with your seller about what actually conveys and asking them, what are you leaving and what are you taking?
It does. I got a question. Oh, sorry. It does. I got a question though. Like the other day we were talking about satellite dishes. It's been stuck in my head for some reason. When it says that the TV antennas do convey, is there often an argument that kind of says, well, because it's attached, or is that too vague a definition of TV antenna?
Well, so here on this, let me go back to screen. Satellite dish is a yes or no, right? So satellite dish is different from a TV antenna. And sometimes satellite dishes belong to the dish company, and sometimes they don't. And so and sometimes a buyer will want the dish removed and holes patched or whatever the case may be. So that's why it's listed separately.
So Shannon, it looks like they clarified the last sentence of this, however, all related mounts, brackets, and hardware do convey, right? That's been rewritten?
That the TV antennas do convey?
No, the brackets.
Oh, yeah, no, the bracket, yes, the brackets have always conveyed. The brackets have always conveyed, and this was a clarification to say that anything that's physically attached conveys. Okay. So they wanted to separate, so there wasn't any confusion that what is on the bracket, right, doesn't convey, but the bracket itself conveys. And it's just like, for the TVs, right? If you have a TV, a big screen TV that's on the wall, right? The mount itself technically conveys, but the TV comes off of it. So that has to be specified. If you want to take your TV mount with you, then you say TV mount doesn't convey, and then the seller needs to understand that they can't leave a big hole in the wall. They have to actually patch and paint and touch it up, because there was not a big hole in the wall when they entered into the contract. So this is it's a tough section, right? It's all about the expectations. The section for other is a good place to write when there's anything extra that needs to be clarified. And this is also where you would be having that conversation with your seller, right? What are you leaving? What are you taking with you? And
Shannon?
Yes.
Is that including the picture frame, nail and bracket also?
Okay, so the way that I look at nails from picture is that if the nail is still in the wall, then you're good on walkthrough, right? As soon as nails and picture hooks and everything come out of the walls, and so there's a bunch of holes all over the wall, then a seller needs to patch and paint. But the nails themselves, if they're still in the wall, so there's no hole, then they're okay.
Shannon,
but it doesn't specifically talk about.
Shannon, can you give an example of a water treatment system?
A water treatment system? Yeah, there are some areas that have hard water, and so there are treatment systems that are hooked up. There are external components that are hooked up to hot water heaters or to the main water that comes into the house to treat. Also, sometimes on septic systems, you have water treatment systems that adjust the water that comes in.
And then Shannon, in the other part, this is where we have a conversation with the seller, especially those homes that have, how a lot of homes now have customized shelving, for example. I mean, you can remove it, but it was customized for a specific area, like the office or the kitchen, et cetera, et cetera. So that would be a conversation to be had with the seller to add to this other part, correct?
So if there's built-in shelves, if there are shelves that were built and bolted to the wall, they convey.
Right. I'm talking about the ones that are built in, but they are not bolted, that you can remove.
Right. So then that's personal property.
Okay. So
That's
it,
just-
it would
it's
be
just-
up to the
we
seller
consider-
to say it stays with this house because, you know, I'm not going to be able to use it in my other house, something like that.
Exactly. They could
Okay.
just negotiate. And that's actually why window treatments are on there, because there are some sellers that have had custom window treatments made
Mhm.
to certain windows,
Okay.
right? That's on there. What I would say is anything that's not conveying that looks like it might, when you are marketing the home, put a little tag on it, put a little note on it that says does not convey. So as people are walking through the home, they can see does not convey, and put notes in the MLS to say does not convey. All right. It's like very rarely someone will take a washer and dryer with them. You know, maybe they just bought a brand new, you know, fancy washer and dryer that, you know, washes and dry cleans and folds their laundry for them, right? And they want to take it with them. So make sure that it says does not convey on a little sticker in the house on the washer and dryer. So it's clear, and that it says in your listing, washer and dryer does not convey.
Okay.
Shannon, I have a question to ask about furniture. When people have small children and they have furniture, bookcases, furniture, dressers, you name it, attached, anchored to the wall.
So that's different. I think that if you think that it's going to be based on how it's anchored to the wall, then I think you could put a note that says does not convey based on how it's anchored to the wall. For example, when I was growing up, one of the bedrooms in my parents' house had this small alcove area, and my dad built a loft bed into it so that, because it was a very small room, and that bed was anchored into the wall, right? It really wasn't so functional outside of where it was. It could have been taken, or it could have been considered a fixture as part of the room, right? This bed conveys. So depending on how bolted to the wall it is, how much it looks like it is part of the, as a fixture versus just attached for safety. I think there's a difference, right, between whether something is built in versus attached for safety.
Okay, to clarify, I guess I was trying to get the clarification whether the seller, I wouldn't necessarily say the furniture will convey because it was anchored to the wall. It's more so clarification whether the seller must repair any damage, because I had that conversation with my sellers, and it happened a couple months ago, and they had to undo everything and have things patched because I didn't think it was okay to leave big holes behind the furniture.
Yeah, so sorry, I since we weren't at the condition part yet, yes, they would have to patch, absolutely,
Okay.
because there was not a hole in the wall when they left, or when the contract was written. So yes, they would have to, absolutely.
Thank you.
Question, I'm sorry,
Absolutely.
I'm always
Okay.
confused. Is there any way you can just clarify for me the water treatment system? What is? I'm Italian, you know, so some words like, what is water treatment system? I always want
No,
to ask and I always confused.
Veronica, we just talked about that.
I'm sorry, I was on the phone. They called, the doctor called for my mom, an appointment, so I need to take the phone. That's the reason. I apologize.
Let's just asked about that. Water treatment system is something that's attached to either the main water that comes in to either to change the condition of the water, or it's attached to the septic system, or attached to the hot water system, the hot water heater. So I can send you some examples of that later.
Okay, thank you. I apologize about that.
Okay.
Shannon, I have a question.
Sure.
So with all the fixtures, the bookshelves, and in Anya's example with the kids' furniture, what if the the buyer doesn't want this stuff to be conveyed. The buyer doesn't need them, and so.
Hold on, let me try.
But the seller says that they will convey. What do you do with them?
Okay, so as an example, the bookshelf. Okay, if the seller says in the listing bookshelf conveys and it's not written into the contract as conveying, then the buyer could.
Did you make sure it didn't have circulars?
They could make the seller remove it. So I would say that it's all about having conversations and setting the expectation on how we need, to move forward with conveyances. Anything is negotiable.
And that's artificial sweetener in it.
And anything is available to convey if the buyers and sellers want it to, right? So it's all about just having the conversation.
So if the seller puts the bookshelves convey, the buyer can say, hey, I don't need them, just remove them, and you just strike through the bookshelves or whatever item convey that you do not want them to convey.
Right, but remember, this is just the listing agreement right now. We're only talking about the listing agreement. So this is just what the seller is offering to convey with the marketing of the property.
I understand, but this part will go into the contract later on.
Not automatically. This is just for your communication with the seller right now and what they are offering with the listing. So if the buyer does not want something, let's say the buyer has their own washer and dryer, but the seller wants to give their washer and dryer. The buyer can make their offer and say, we don't want your washer and dryer. And if it says does not convey in the contract, then the seller would have to remove the washer and dryer that already exists there. Okay, so we'll talk about that more on Thursday when we're in the contract.
Okay, all right, thank you. Thank you.
Shannon, quick question. For any of these items that are not applicable, we don't need to select the yes or no option, correct? Like wood stove or window fan or whatever have you.
You need to mark yes or no. If there's a blank, it needs to be marked yes or no, so it's not ambiguous.
Gotcha.
Good question. I don't like to see blanks, right? I want to see yes or no. As is marketing, seller does or does not authorize the broker to offer entire property in as is condition. What does that mean? Well, every property is technically offered in as is condition. What this means is that you would be advertising that the seller is doing no repairs at all, right? So it's take it or leave it. In most cases, this is not beneficial to a seller. This would happen only in like short sales or sometimes estates. Very rare occasions would we do the as-is marketing up front. Leased services or systems, leased items. This is for maybe security system monitoring or lawn service, or if there's a fuel tank. Sometimes pest control or home warranties will convey. So anything like that that the seller has that would convey to the buyer at closing would get listed here. In the most common item would be for fuel tanks for propane. That's the most common because the tanks are leased from the company that's providing the fuel. And so if it's full at closing, then the buyer would take over. Is the seller going to offer a home warranty? Yes or no, right? If they are, then we talk about that here. And if they're going to offer home warranty, it benefits them to have you put that in place ahead of time and have listing coverage as well, because our home warranty companies offer an additional piece that covers the sellers. So if something happens during the time of the listing agreement or something comes up in the home inspection that may be covered by the home warranty, then the seller can use their home warranty to have the repairs done. So this is actually a feature that many sellers don't use, and I think they should. Because it's just an added benefit. You already have the warranty on the property. You can use the coverage as a seller. Major systems and utilities. This is where you verify with your clients how the utilities are in the house, right? So is the hot water heated from oil, gas, electric? Is the air conditioning cooled from oil, gas, electric? Is it a heat pump? Same with heat. Is the water supply public, private well, or community well? Is the sewage public, or is there a septic system? This is important because this goes in the MLS. If it's septic, there could be additional disclosures that are required.
And if the seller doesn't know some of these things, we can always get it from MLS, correct?
The seller needs to know these things about their home. You can certainly look in the MLS to see if there's information from the previous listing so that you can start to gather this information. But the MLS is not reliable as far as your agreement between us and the seller, because someone could have inputted the information incorrectly in the previous listing.
Can I say something?
Where would the
Shannon? Can you hear me?
Yep, go ahead.
Okay, if you know the property identification record that you can get from the county, or you can always go to the courthouse, and it'll give you all the information for the property, and it is correct.
Okay,
so
great.
that trumps the MLS.
Okay, and would the owners have this documentation at their home, or so we would have to go to the courthouse?
You would have to go and do some research, and
Okay.
having a plat is very good too, because a lot of realtors do not put plats on the on the MLS or anything.
Okay.
Yeah, if it's acreage, having the plat, if it's on a septic, having the plat is helpful to see where the drain field is. Absolutely.
Thank you.
Most homeowners are going to have this information. They're not living blindly in their home. And if they've only owned it for a few years, they might have a home inspection from when they moved in and have some of this information that was verified during their inspections from when they bought. So certainly have them gather their documents. Broker duties. Okay, this is a little different from yesterday. We had broker duties from a buyer side, and now we have broker duties from the listing side. It says that the broker shall protect and promote the interests of the seller and provide services consistent with the standards of practice and competence, right, that were expected of licensees. And that the broker is telling the seller that the seller has to acknowledge that we're bound by bylaws, policies, procedures, rules of the MLS, Code of Ethics, Code of Virginia, regional rules and regulations for our lockbox systems. This is saying to the sellers, hey, we're here to help you, but we have limitations, right? And we're not going to go outside of what our limitations are just because you tell me to do something. We have to still follow rules. So the broker will use reasonable effort to find buyers at the established price and terms that are acceptable to the seller and help to negotiate on behalf of the seller. The agent cannot bind the seller to anything. We can just help negotiate and come to the terms, and the buyer and seller are the ones that agree to and sign off on the terms. The broker will market the property. So that includes things that you talk about in your listing appointment, right? How are you going to market it? Are you going to market it on social media? Are you going to mail to neighborhoods? Are you going to hold open houses? Are you going to make calls to other agents? It has to go in the MLS, of course, if you're going to be doing all of those things outside of the brokerage. So what are you going to do to market the property? How are you going to find buyers? Brokers must present all written offers and counteroffers to and from the seller. It doesn't matter if the home is already ratified. Does not matter if you already have a ratified contract. If you receive written offers on the property, you still have to present to your client. Okay, so, and that's actually not a bad thing, because backup offers can turn into primary offers, and backup offers can encourage primary offers to do the right thing. So continuing to receive offers is not necessarily a bad thing, but every written offer must be presented. If an offer comes in that's way low and you don't think your client's going to accept it in your negotiation in the beginning before you're ratified, you still have to present it, right? If your seller gives you written instructions that say, do not present any offer below XYZ, that's very different because they've given you written instruction. Otherwise, you don't get to make the decision on whether you think it's too low or not.
Shannon, I have a question on this.
Yes.
Are we obligated to present offers that are only verbal? They're not in writing?
No, you're not.
Okay.
You're not. From a best practice standpoint, I think we should always be having those conversations with our clients and saying, you know, so-and-so called and, you know, their client wants to make an offer at whatever. And I think it's a good practice to have the conversations, but it's not a verbal offer in real estate is not binding. It has nothing behind it. It's simply a conversation. Now, this next one, letter E, is important for you guys to know in how it affects the Bright MLS updates. Brokers shall not continue to market, show, and or permit showings after property is subject to a ratified contract of sale, unless otherwise instructed by seller in writing. Okay, why am I pointing this out? Because agents are not using active under contract and pending statuses properly. What this letter E says is that as soon as you have a ratified contract, your default status in Bright is pending. You do not go to active under contract. You go to pending. Active under contract means that the seller has instructed you to continue to market the home, allow showings, and seek bona fide backup offers. Active under contract is not the equivalent of a previous status that we had, which was contingent, no kick out. For those of you that have been in the business for a little while, you remember contingent, no kick out, and contract. So there are agents that are putting active under contract for their ratified contracts that still have contingencies in place, and they don't understand. So what I will say is, if you see a listing that is active under contract, it could help if you pick up the phone, right? If your client might be interested in it, and call the agent and ask, are you still allowing showings? Because that's going to help to get our agent community to be doing the right thing when they realize that they're not actually using the correct status. And some of them may be using the correct status, right? If there's a home sale contingency, active under contract is the correct status because they still are looking for bona fide backup offers to kick out that contract that has the home sale contingency.
Yeah, I was going to ask Shannon, could that apply also if there's a home inspection contingency with like an option to void, and it's a quick one, like, I don't know, 3 days or something like that? Could you use the active under contract with that because the seller still wants you to possibly get a backup offer?
Only if the seller directs you in writing to keep it available for showings. So that's not an automatic. That would have to be a specific conversation that you have, that the home is going to be still advertised in that active under contract status.
May I ask?
But the automatic.
Go ahead.
Can we go back to
Okay, sorry.
D?
Okay.
Wait, hold on.
Yeah,
Wes,
back
let
on
me get yours and then we'll go.
Okay, yeah, back to where accepting an offer after the contract is ratified, notwithstanding active on the contract. So let's say we go pending and then we get an offer after we ratified. do we have to present the offer? If the seller decides to accept that offer after we've ratified, how do we navigate that with the
They
buyer's
can't.
agent? Okay,
Well,
okay.
they could accept it as a backup, but they can't, unless there's a kick out clause, they can't kick out the first one just because the second one's better, because they're already ratified.
Okay, all right, okay. All right, great, thank you.
And can I just ask a real quick question? So contingent is pending now on the MLS.
Everything is pending in the
Okay,
MLS unless your client tells you to continue to allow showings,
mhm,
which would be automatically on a home sale contingency, right?
mhm.
Or if for some reason they're nervous about the current contract that they have and they want you to continue to allow showings and solicit backup offers.
So that just has to be in writing, right?
It has to be in writing, yeah. And so in most cases, unless it's vacant, right, the sellers want it to go to pending. They don't want any more showings. They're done. It gets ratified and they're done. They're like, phew, right? So I wanted to point that out.
Just another quick question.
Yes, Dina.
Since it's pending rectify the contract, then seller wants to put it off the market until they close it. How that gonna work? Is that something there is a legally procedure we can or we cannot?
So ask me that again. They want it off the market until after
Yes.
closing once it's ratified?
Yes.
Well, so technically once it says pending, it is off the market. No one can show it anymore once it's pending. So when you get a contract, yeah, when you get the contract and it's ratified and you change it to pending in the MLS, it means nobody else can show it anymore.
But still it's gonna be in the public. So just he don't want to put it in a public. He don't want to show in a public. That's for his own personal purpose,
Okay, so I see. If they don't want it advertised in the public at all, then they can't put it in the MLS. And they're gonna have a lot of trouble selling it because of the restrictions that we have on marketing when it's not in the MLS. So it won't stay out as active to the public. Most of the websites will update and say pending, or they'll say contract pending or just pending, but it won't be able to be taken off the market because that's not an accurate depiction of the true status of the property. We can't misrepresent what the status is of the property.
Right. And just one more add on to that. So this all others website like Redfin, Zillow, they follow the MLS. What's exactly happening there, or it's accurate with the MLS?
Yeah, for the most part, they do. For the most part, I mean, occasionally it won't update correctly, but for the most part, they're feeding right from the MLS.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Good questions. F says broker shall account for all money and property received in trust by the broker, right? That's earnest money deposits and things like that. So that's similar to what we had yesterday. Section G is about showings. So brokers shall show property during reasonable hours to prospective buyers and will accompany or accommodate other licensees and their prospective buyers, inspectors, appraisers, yada, 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 for showings in order to consummate the sale of the property. What does this mean? Well, truly what this means is that if an agent calls you and from another company and says, can you show my buyer because I'm out of town? This is saying you'll do it. In reality, an agent from another company should be calling their colleague, right? Because the lines get muddied. But really, it's saying that you're telling your seller you'll do whatever it takes to allow all of the prospective buyers to come through, even if they are represented by someone else, that we're going to do what we can to get them through. Here is where you guys would talk about what the hours are for showings or what your basic showing instructions are. So here on my listings, I talk to my clients about 2-hour notice. I think 2-hour notice is a common courtesy. So that's my minimum. Obviously, there could be situations where we need more than that, but that's my minimum is a 2-hour notice. So I put in here something like 2-hour notice via showing time, confirmation required. Right, it's just something like that so that we've had the discussion. I'm going to talk to my clients in this section a little bit more, if I haven't already, about how we do showings, how we schedule showings, what we're going to do as far as who we're going to let in, right? Are we going to allow agents to come and have, the clients bring, all their extended family with them? Or are we only going to let the decision maker come in? Are we going to restrict timing? Do we allow overlapping showings, which I think we should never in any market allow overlapping showings? Do we require masks and booties? And are we going to require the pre-approval letter before we approve the showing? That's what I've been doing. I've been requiring a pre-approval letter for every one of my listings in the last year before we approve the showings. It's worked out wonderfully. And you limit the number of people that come through because if they're not approved, they can't come through. So these are all.
Quick question.
Yeah. Yes.
So with this also, because I noticed like on the MLS, sometimes they will say like an hour notice before showing. And is this that section where sometimes it'll say vacant, you can come and go?
Go and, yeah, vacant, go and show.
Yeah, go and show. Would this be that section as well?
Yeah. And
Okay.
I don't ever suggest vacant, go and show either as a listing agent. I want to know who's coming and going in my listings. So vacant, fine, right? They can schedule it. They can still schedule it through showing time. And I want to see that they're going. Maybe I don't need a notice, but I still want them to schedule it through showing time so that I know that they're going and that I don't have to rely on whether Central Lock tells me they actually opened the lockbox.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Absolutely. It says broker shall or shall not install electronic lockbox. So are you putting a lockbox on the door or do you have to meet people there every time to open the door? Electronic lockbox means the central lockboxes. And will you be putting a for sale sign? Remember our bright rules are as soon as the sale sign goes out, you have 24 hours to get it into bright. That is considered public marketing. Okay.
That's for sale or coming soon, I thought, too.
It just has to be in bright in either status.
Oh, okay.
As soon as the sign is out front, bright has to know that you have a listing coming. So you can either have coming soon status or immediately to active.
Shannon, if we don't have a lockbox, is there one that can be loaned from Kingston, for example?
Talk to Drew.
Okay.
Yep.
And for clarification, so it says shall install an electronic lockbox. What if we have those little turnkey ones? I assume it's no, and then we still put.
Yeah, I'm going to ask all of you to not ever use combo boxes for your showings. If you have a contractor that needs to go in, you can do that. But as far as our showings are concerned, electronic lock boxes, the central lock boxes are what we use. And if you don't have one, reach out to Drew or me and or your PC coach. We have some in Falls Church and Fredericksburg, some boxes, and we will make sure that you have one until you can go over to the association and get yourself a box. Okay. MLS, internet advertising. Seller authorizes or does not authorize broker to market via the MLS.
Shannon?
Okay. Yes.
Shannon, before we move on, I have a broker duty question.
Okay.
yeah, if you found a seller finished a basement without permit, where we should do disclosure, and should we put that in the remark section?
Good question, Jenny. Good question. So when it comes to disclosure, remember, we touched on this yesterday, that the sellers have less duty than the agents as far as these types of disclosures are concerned. And as agents, once we find out about something, we absolutely need to disclose it. In the remarks, I would disclose that, Jenny. And what I have is what I've done a few times recently, and I've seen other agents do as well, is that they've had this conversation with their sellers and encourage their sellers to disclose from themselves. So they type just a regular document that says seller's statement of disclosure. And the seller is actually saying that the basement was finished without permits, whatever they want to say. They can be as vague as they want, right? But it's the seller that's disclosing it. And then you can add that document as well to the documents section of Bright with your deport disclosure.
Okay. I think that's probably smart, because I have heard that one of agents put the without permitting in the remark section, the appraiser actually came, lower than the listing price.
Well, it would, and it should. And so I think it should be in both places. I think it needs to be disclosed in the remarks. And actually, from a practical standpoint, if you know that there is finished square footage that is not permitted, it should not play into the value in when you run comps. So if I had a listing that had a basement that was not finished via permits, I would be pricing it as an unfinished basement.
Okay, thank you.
Because most appraisers are actually going to catch it. Even if you don't put it in the remarks, they will catch it. Or the agents will catch it. So it's a better way to price it lower. And then if someone's willing to pay higher, then that's better.
And the other question, if I'm the buyer agent, found the listing, with that condition, what kind of approach I supposed to do it?
If you're the buyer's agent, well, if you're the buyer's agent, you just have to disclose to your own client anything you know about the condition.
I mean, should we ask the seller to fix it or to get the permit, or what we should do?
So that depends on your buyer's level of comfort with the process, right? So if it was known to your buyer ahead of time that it was unpermitted, and they don't feel that they're overpaying, right? They feel like they're paying for an unfinished basement, then it might be okay. If it was a situation where nobody knew that it was unpermitted until after the contract was ratified, and so now the values and everything are based on it being permitted, then I think that it's a fair discussion to have with the seller for some sort of remedy.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Shannon, have a quick question.
Yes, Dina.
Yes, the buyer bought a house with a 4-bedroom actually, but MLS was at only 3. And now you wanna sell it. Would you put like a 4 or 3?
So this is along the same lines as Jenny's topic about permitting.
Right.
If the tax record does not match the actual home, then this is a red flag. So if the tax record says 3 bedrooms and you walk through and you see 4 bedrooms, that's a red flag to me that extra bedroom was not permitted. And unless my seller can provide documentation to show that it was permitted, I would only list it as a 3-bedroom. Our counties around Northern Virginia are alerted by permits, right, to additional square footage, additional features, et cetera. They want your clients' tax dollars. And as soon as the permits are processed, it's on their radar. And so they will reassess because they want your client's tax dollars. So if the permits were not processed, then they haven't updated their system. And so that's a red flag to me. So I would investigate that more. But if they don't have permits, I would not list it just based on what it looks like. I would list it on what it is legally.
Thank you.
Shannon,
Yes.
can I ask a follow-up question on Jenny's comment about the permits?
Yes.
What happens when we take a listing and the seller is selling a house that they did not finish the basement and they don't know whether it was permitted or not permitted, but there is possible evidence of thinking that maybe it was finished after the fact, it wasn't done by the original builder?
So you go to the county and have your seller go to the county and see what they can find out. And start there. So because you have to disclose what you know or don't know if you want it to go smooth. So again, if the tax record says one thing and the property looks like something different, then it's likely that there aren't permits for the work. Now, a buyer can come in and say, I don't care. I'll go back and I'll get permits, right? I'll do the work and I'll have it certified and everything will be fine. But if you can't provide the permits and show evidence, then a buyer needs to know that before they move forward.
Can I say something real quick? Can you hear me?
Sure. We're going to move on from this.
Okay, they may have taken out a permit, but a lot of times the guy doesn't come back to check the work. So I guess you could go to the county to figure out, but a lot of people do, especially like around this area, they take out the permits and then the people, because of COVID or something, they couldn't come back to inspect the work. So it might be there, but you just have to do a little bit of digging.
Well, and some of it is older, right? And so before everything was digitized, and sometimes there just weren't permits, right?
Yeah.
Homeowners. So there's a lot of scenarios that can happen. And each county handles things a little bit differently. Fairfax County has FIDO, the website that is awesome to look up information. It's one of my favorite county related.
Can you please spell for us?
Yeah, FIDO. All right, so marketing in the MLS. So here's the thing with marketing and the MLS. Because of Bright and their rules that they have upon us, we have to enter the listings into their database when we start marketing them. Okay, we don't have the ability anymore to have public marketing outside of their database. They want to know what's happening, right? The MLS used to be a way that we could record sales and track sales and share information. And now Bright wants to be used as a marketing platform. So if you don't use Bright as your marketing platform, you don't get to enter it into Bright at all, right? If you sold it before it went into the MLS, you don't get to enter it. So keep that in mind when you're talking to your clients about how you're going to market the property. If you're putting it into coming soon status, it can stay in coming soon status for 21 days, and then it will automatically flip to active. In the coming soon status, the home cannot be shown. You can do any type of marketing you want outside of showing the home as soon as it's entered into the coming soon status. I'm going to tell you guys right now that we are not doing anything with the waiver of broker submission to MLS that it talks about here. As long as you have this section filled in completely, we are covered in case they audit us. But basically, Bright, they want to know if we have any office exclusive listings or if clients don't want their listing in MLS. There's a lot of documentation that they're looking for right now, which is in this document right here. As long as you have this filled in properly, we are going to be okay. So you have to check the box in section A1 that says that you will enter it into the MLS for marketing purposes, either within 3 days of commencement of the listing period or on or before blank date. So
Quick
one of
question.
these has to be open. Yes.
So sorry. So I'm actually not even sure if this happens, but I noticed you said when it goes into coming soon status, you can't show it. So are there scenarios where, like, say a person is looking for that house while it, like, you know, a person is looking for a house that meets that requirements and the agent may see it on the MLS in coming soon status, and they want to take a look at it, like how would you go about that? Or am I misunderstanding?
No, yeah, no one can show the home in coming soon status. It has coming soon status means the home is not yet ready to be shown.
Okay.
So it means it's going to be active at a certain date. And so what you're looking for is the date that it's going to be active so that you can go show it right that day.
Okay, got you. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
So,
If
Shannon,
we don't have a date,
I'm sorry.
yes.
So you were into that we should just to, I just want to be sure that you are going to follow up whatever you were saying before somebody asks you. The marketing you said is 10.1a that we should mark. Okay. Right?
Yeah, that's what I was just going over that section right now.
Okay.
So if you mark within 3 business days of commencement of the listing period, that means that it has to be entered into the MLS within 3 days, right, of this agreement, or you have an on or before date. So it has to be listed in the MLS on or before that date. If one of those is not marked, then this agreement is not enforceable, right? So remember, we talked about how there are certain pieces that make these agreements enforceable. And on the market date is one of the key criteria. Now, this date can change, and that's done via listing amendment, which I'm going to show you towards the end. Seller authorizes or does not authorize marketing the property through the MLS to make it available to the third-party website. So what does this mean? Well, this is that feed we talked about where it goes out to Realtor.com and Zillow and Trulia and Redfin and all of these, you know, other sites that are pulling it, right, where the clients are looking. So if the client says they do not authorize, then when you enter the listing into Bright, you have to mark no on these so that it doesn't syndicate to the other sites. There's no reason that they shouldn't want it syndicated to the other sites in most cases. So you would mark authorizes. This next section talks about authorizing the address and comments and an automated estimate, right? That lovely Zestimate that messes with us every time we talk to our sellers about what listing price they should go. You know, they're like, well, Zillow says, like, that's great. I'm glad Zillow's a person. So those are all things that are marked here. And again, that when you enter it into Bright, there's places to mark to match this. All right, so you're having those conversations. And
So
then section D.
Sorry, Shannon, section B. So we rarely click on the box that says seller does not authorize, correct?
Correct. That's correct. That's correct. Section D is the authorization for coming soon status, right? So is it going to go in coming soon status before it goes active? That's where you tell it here. So you have to talk to your client about whether—
I'm sorry, Shannon, I'm sorry. So the letter C is all seller does not authorize. I'm sorry, I don't know if it's just me. So when you say letter C, the seller does not authorize the display of untitled comments, is all does not authorize?
No, most of the time they authorize. Most of the time they would authorize to have their address out there, right? Buyers want to know where the property is.
So the most is also, okay, so it's all yes. Also when they say they want to go to realtor.com, so it's always seller authorized, all of that's fine, right?
Remember, this is a discussion that you're having with your clients.
Of course, but what you advise to, of course, to.
Yeah, they get to make the decision. You're explaining to them what it means, and then they get to decide, right?
Okay, so it's all authorized, okay.
Okay. Coming soon status. So this again is if it's going into coming soon status before it goes to active. Okay, this gives the opportunity to do advertising prior to showings being allowed. In the MLS, it does not have to go to coming soon status. Here's the caveat, because it cannot be shown, if you know of someone, an agent in our office that has a buyer that wants something similar to your listing, as soon as you put it in coming soon, no one can see it. However, if we have a situation where it's not in coming soon status and we have a signed listing agreement and it's not yet active in the MLS, but one of our colleagues in our office wants to show it, they can. And it can go under contract. It just can never be entered then into the MLS because it went into the contract status prior to being entered into the MLS. It can't just go in as pending, right? It would have to go in as active and be marketed to the public and then go to pending.
So let me ask you a question, Shannon. And I had this happen. The property was under contract. It couldn't be shown. And then all of a sudden went to under contract. Sorry, it was on coming soon. And then it went under contract. And then we found out that the person that was doing the staging bought the home. So what happens in that case? I mean, because that's something that shouldn't happen, correct?
Well, yeah, it shouldn't happen. I mean, the person who was doing the staging didn't go in to look at the home, so that's a little different of a scenario. I'm not sure how much trouble the listing agent would get into because of that. I have seen scenarios where it's in coming soon status and it goes to pending because there is an offer that's ratified sight unseen. In this market, the buyers, they're looking for a specific neighborhood, they're looking for a specific type of home, they're looking for a specific price point, and they don't want to wait. And so they make the offer sight unseen.
Right.
And it's tough because it would go from coming soon to pending because that's the only option. And I suggest to our agents that we put comments in the listing that say ratified sight unseen. I also suggest that we put comments in our contracts that say sight unseen.
Okay.
So that we're covered. And there are still agents out there that do not follow the rules that are provided to us, and they will allow showings in the coming soon status and accept offers and ratify them. And, they subscribe to the ask forgiveness and not permission mentality. And it's just, it's unfortunate. What I will say is that the listing agent and the buyer's agent in a situation where there's a showing in coming soon status are both equally as liable and both will be fined. And so it's not just one or the other, it's both.
Right.
The buyer's and the listing agent.
All right.
Okay.
Thanks.
Yes.
I just wanted to clarify. So you're saying that as soon as you put for sale or coming soon, it has to be in the MLS within 24 hours. And then it can be coming soon for 21 days or a certain date, but you cannot show it actively during coming soon. But somebody could see it as coming soon and sight unseen submit an offer, and that can be accepted. And that's fine. Like, it's okay.
Yeah, they could the inside of it the first time at their home inspection.
Okay, all right. I just
Yeah,
wanted to make sure.
absolutely. Yeah, it's frustrating, right? Because we're given these rules that we're bound by, and then agents are trying to do the best by their clients, right? So then we got to get around the rules, right, to do best by the clients and still stay within the gray area, and it's tough. So I do see frustration. I've experienced frustration before where I've watched a coming soon listing and then seen it go to pending, and I'm like, oh, right? And then I've also had ones where I've submitted a sight unseen because I knew it was exactly what my client needed, but the seller was nervous about it, right? So it's hard. It's hard. All right, I'm skipping through. I'm not touching on the representation section because we spent a lot of time on that yesterday, that section 11. So it's the same exact as what we went over yesterday. So in section 12, we're going to talk about compensation. And I don't want to spend too much time on this because we've talked about compensation a lot over the last week, and I know that we could have an entire class on this. So I want to just explain what the document says. Okay, what it says is that the seller will pay a total amount to the brokerage of blank if we get a ratified contract, right? And similar to yesterday, it says that compensation is also earned if within a certain number of days of the expiration or termination of the agreement, there's a contract ratified with a ready, willing, and able buyer who saw the property during the time of the agreement. Okay, but if the seller has fired us and hired someone else, then that doesn't apply. All right. Okay. So let's go back. Seller shall pay total compensation of blank. All right. So we're going to use, let's just use 6%. Okay. Seller's going to pay a total of 6%. Now, if we go to B, where it says cooperating broker, what this says is that if there is a buyer's agent, KW United will share a portion of our commission with that buyer's agent. So let's say we put 3% there, okay? So there's a total compensation of 6, and the buyer's agency compensation would be 3. So what happens if there is no buyer's agent? If it's an unrepresented buyer that comes in?
You get full commission?
You get the full commission. You do not have to do dual agency to get the full commission. This was my soapbox yesterday, right? You can still represent your seller to the fullest that you had been the entire time because you are going to be making the full commission on this, right? And have the buyer be unrepresented. You also can take that buyer's agency compensation, that 3%, grab one of your colleagues, have them represent the buyer, you collect a referral fee off of that buyer agency compensation, right? Mm-hmm. So you get a little extra and the buyer is represented. So everybody is taken care of, okay? So it's not the payment. One of the common mistakes I see is that up here, you put only what goes on the listing side, and here only what goes on the buyer side. The top line is the total, because the total goes to KW United, and then KW United is offering to share a portion down here. That's how that goes. Everybody good on that? Okay. Variable rate commission.
Shannon?
We don't, yes.
I'm sorry, before you move there, I want to clarify something. I know that yesterday you talked about charging everyone the same amount, and the same thing applies to the listing side. My question is there some sort of a rules that we have to abide by when it comes to the buyer compensation? Could we give out different buyer compensation depending on a situation, and still keeping our total commission the same?
So I would say it's a little trickier on that, because if you're doing a variable commission on the buyer agency compensation, then you're collecting more on the listing side.
Mhm.
And so you would be needing to provide a different service in those situations.
So and the reason why I'm asking this is because recently on a referral that I referred a client to or a seller to someone else in a different, it was KW, but a different state. They have charged the seller 6%, but then the listing agent received more than 3%, but they only paid out 2.5 or something like that. And they collected that referral fee off of that. So the listing agent received 3.5 and the buyer's agent received 2.5.
And so if there was a situation where all referrals that you receive are split that way, then that would work because that's duplicatable.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, absolutely.
Can I say something really quick?
Sure.
As a listing agent, you will be spending more money than a buyer's agent will. So you're going to be spending more money on advertising, whether you use Google. And so just, you know, I mean, I have been selling real estate for a couple of years, and I have lost so much money as a listing agent by not giving myself a little bit more to compensate for the amount of money I spend in advertising. So just always know that if you're listing a property.
Jennifer, that's a good point. And that's why we are going to have one of the classes soon that is talking about, you know, what our services are on listings and knowing at this rate, this is what we're providing. And at this rate, this is what we're providing. And at a different rate, this is what we're providing so that you are covered, because no one wants you as agents to be paying the clients to be selling their homes, right? This is a business for you to be in, to be supporting your family and achieving your own goals, right? So that's a good point. Thank you, Jennifer.
I just have a hard time. I've been in the situation when I find out right before closing or a closing table, looking at the alta, that the listing agent got paid 3.5. When I've worked with plenty of buyers that I do a lot of work, and the listing agent feels like just slapped the property on the market and didn't really do much. And you as a buyer agent will do a lot and say, wow, that side got paid 3.5 when I'm only getting paid 2.5. So I wanted to be fair to all.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's hard. We don't always know why that happens. And
Right.
you know, we could be at a settlement table and we could see a situation where maybe they charged more on the listing because the buyer decided, that client actually went and bought something that was a FSBO that wasn't offering any commission. So they didn't get two sides of a transaction. Or, you know, maybe they had listed another house, or, you know, they discounted for them. And, you know, there's all kinds of scenarios. It's very hard when we see what others are doing. We do try to compare.
You have to just get more listings. That's, you know, that's a hard thing to do, because that's what's going to advertise your name out there.
What we have to do is make sure that we are true to our own business.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what we're talking about right now, is ourselves, right? And so what we have to do is make sure in this, when we talk about compensation and services, we have to be true and consistent to our own business. And if we see something, right, that someone else has done and it looks like it's a good idea and we want to put it in our business, and that's great, right? And we should do that, right, if it's going to work for us, but we have to be consistent for ourselves. So if we are going to offer certain services, it has to be at the same price across the board for every client. Right. And that's the point that I want to have you guys take away from this section is, this is not an arbitrary number that goes here. This is something that from your business plan, you are going to decide. So as you're working with your coaches and your team leaders, you are going to work out what your business plan is for moving into this 2021 year, and how much you are charging on your listing, and how much you are willing to accept on your buyer agency compensation when you're working with buyers, and what services you provide for that.
It's interesting that we're talking about this because, you know, I'm new to the business. I'm trying to move from doing it part-time to doing it full-time, but I have a lot of friends that are realtors, and all of them have told me you have to find listings, because as a buyer's agent, like Anya and Jennifer said, you do so much work and you do not get the compensation that you deserve. So actually all my friends, they give out their buyers because they just don't want to do it. They don't want to spend the time showing homes, writing the contract, going back and forth with their clients, and they just do listings.
Yeah, well, and the last thing I'll say on that before we move on is that in the beginning of this class today, I mentioned that listings are for the longevity of real estate, right? The saying list fast, and it's because of the leverage piece. It's because you can only physically be with one buyer at a time, where you can have multiple listings on the market at the same time working for your dollars, right? And that's why we start with buyers generally, and then we work into the listings. Also, because all of you are with Keller Williams, I'm sure all of you have read the MREA and you've all looked at the organizational chart, and you see that when you start out in business, you are everything, right? And the next thing that your first hire is leverage to help you with your contracts and documents and admin work, right? And then as you get into your third and fourth levels, you're hiring showing assistants and buyer's agents, and you are focusing more on the listings because that's where your lead gen is maximized, right? So it is part of the process. And yes, we all should be looking for listings, especially in this market. Everybody should be looking for listings. We need nothing but listings right now. So anyway, so yes, you're absolutely right. That was how we started this conversation, and that's why listings are very important to understand. All right, we are only on page 6 of this first document. So I want to keep going. Variable rate commission, I'm going to touch on for you guys so that you understand what it means when you see it in the MLS. You don't need to know about it as far as how it affects you, because you don't do dual agency. What variable rate means, when you see it in the MLS, if it says disclosed variable rate, what it means is that the listing agent has been authorized by their seller for dual agency, and if they do dual agency, they're going to reduce their commission. So what that means is that the net to the seller is better on the offer that comes in the same as yours if the agent is doing dual agency, okay? For example, let's say Anya is a listing agent and Anya has the buyer, okay? And Anya is gonna do variable rate, so she's gonna reduce her commission. She's only gonna charge 4% total instead of 6, and the offer 700,000. And I bring in the buyer to Anya and my offer 700,000, but they have to pay 6%. The seller is going to get less money, right? Because they're paying more commission, because I'm getting this buyer agency compensation, right? The full 3%, where if Anya brought the buyer to her seller, she's reducing her commission. So it has to be disclosed because the listing agent's client is in a better position, right? That listing agent's buyer that they're bringing is in a better position to win than your client. That's why it's being offered as a piece of disclosure in the MLS, okay? Retainer fee. Similar to yesterday, broker accepts a retainer fee upfront. This is either upfront commission or not, right? On listings, I've seen this collected in certain circumstances, depending on certain marketing or certain things that agents are doing that might be above and beyond what you normally would do. You collect the retainer fee for certain services, or just, but it has to be consistent, right? So any client that picks your platinum service has to pay $1,000 retainer fee because you're doing all of these extra things that require money up front, right? Or you can choose to charge everybody a $250 upfront retainer fee, and that covers your photos, okay? Or your staging consult, or whatever it is that you provide everyone. Or you charge nothing as a retainer fee. You have to decide in your business what you're gonna do. Early termination.
sorry, Shannon, if you put actually expenses, so it depends in each listing, is it still okay or not? Or you prefer just the amount?
Okay, in retainer fee, you don't put actual expense. In early termination fee, you can put a dollar amount or actual expenses. And I personally put actual expenses in my early termination fee in every single one of my listing agreements, and I provide receipts to my clients in the event that something happens. I've had to fire clients before. It feels good sometimes, I'll be honest, right? But it's very rare that there is that early termination. It could be a situation where a seller thinks that they're being transferred and then they're not being transferred anymore, right? It's not your fault. If they want to, you can waive that, of course, in certain situations that are duplicatable. Or if a seller just decides, my sister-in-law, my brother-in-law, my best friend just got a license and I want to use them instead, but you've spent all this money, you can let them out once they pay the early termination fee. Confidential information. Obviously, there's a lot of confidential information that comes into play when you're talking to clients. This is just alerting everyone that we need to keep information confidential that is confidential. It also says, the last line, information concerning latent material defects about the property is not considered confidential information. So this is, again, with the condition piece, right? Agents have to disclose this. This is not confidential. If they tell you that they have a mold issue or there's a leak in the roof or the HVAC doesn't work, that's not confidential just because of your agent-client relationship with them. Authorization to disclose other offers. This gets confusing sometimes. So buyers, agents will call and say, do you have any other offers? What they also can ask is, are the offers from your own client, right? The variable rate piece, the dual agents, designated? Is it from your brokerage or is it from someone outside your brokerage, right? Because again, savvy buyer's agents are going to know that if it's an offer that's from the listing agent's own client or from their own colleague, they may have a leg up, right? So is it okay with the seller for you to disclose offers? Yes or no? I always say yes, because I would like to be able to tell buyer's agents that call, yes, you have 6 offers you're competing with, send me your highest and best. I don't think there's any reason to, in the majority of our business, to not disclose that there are other offers.
Question.
Yes.
In this one, that means that you can disclose the number of offers, but you cannot disclose some of the terms of the offer?
Correct.
Okay.
Shannon, could you go back to the confidential information and give us example of what would be confidential information that cannot be disclosed to other parties?
That the reason they are selling is because they're getting divorced. So any information that the seller gives you permission to share is fine, right? But if they tell you, we just decided to get divorced, or, whatever, right? We don't want anyone to know, you cannot leak that to anyone.
So how would you go about it if they didn't think this was confidential and they didn't tell you it's confidential? I guess, where's the line that you know what's confidential and what's not confidential if they haven't said, this is confidential?
So you're going to have those conversations when you're doing your needs analysis. And you're going to say things like, buyers agents ask a lot of times, why is the seller moving? What are you comfortable with me saying? Certain financial information is confidential. If someone lost their job, right? So it's really, I hate to say it's on the common sense line, right? As far as what you're telling and what you're not telling. But most of what the seller is telling you is considered confidential unless it crosses the line to be material defect with the property or is something that says, they say you can share it. Almost everything else is going to fall automatically into that confidential side unless you've asked them specifically, may I share?
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Yep, absolutely.
Shannon, can I ask another question?
Sure.
So if I call a listing agent, right, and I say, "Hi, did you receive any other offer?" And they say, "Yes, I receive. I receive other offer." Do I am allowed to ask also the term, like, you know, do you have one of these offer has a lot of a home, you know, have a home inspection contingency? Do I'm allowed?
Yeah, you can ask it if you want. They don't have to tell you.
They don't have to tell me. So they don't have a like obligation to tell me no, right? Okay, just to be sure.
From the perspective of the listing agent, and if our client give us the permission to disclose, check the disclose, can I disclose maybe if some of the offers has like closing cost or stuff like that?
So this section is very specific to whether the offers are obtained by the listing agent, another member of the listing broker's firm, or a cooperating broker. This does not have anything to do with terms. That would be an additional written acknowledgement from your client that they have told you you can disclose certain pieces if buyer's agents ask. Okay, so this document right here is very specific to just, do you have other offers and who have they come from? That's it. And I actually don't, I think in most cases, we should not be getting into the weeds about the terms of the offers that we've received. It's not a good practice because it could show favoritism, right? If you have 8 offers and you're telling 2 of them about the details that you have and the rest don't get the same courtesy, then it can get us into trouble. All right, let's move on. Relocation program and compliance with fair housing laws, those are the same as yesterday in the buyer agency agreement. Condo association and property owners association. I'm going to cover these together, okay? Really quick. We are required our sellers are required to provide a resale disclosure package to the buyers once they're ratified, or right before they can be provided before they're ratified, quite frankly. But it's in accordance with the residential sales contract. So what this says here is that they are or are not in a condo association or a property owners association, which is, we call it familiarly, a homeowners association. This is asking who is going to order the documents and how they're going to get paid and when they're going to get ordered and what the dues are, who the contact people are. That's what this section is, okay? It talks about the Code of Virginia. Just from a talking point for your clients, when that resale disclosure comes and it's delivered to the buyers have 3 days to walk away. Okay, that's the automatic in the statute. They have 3 days to walk away. Any deficiencies that are listed, any violations that are listed in that disclosure packet are an automatic requirement for the seller to remedy. If the seller has not remedied before closing and provided a cure letter, the buyer can walk away at closing. All right, so those are the important pieces to know right now about this section. So who will order it? When is it going to get ordered? And the information about the HOA, the contact information, and whether they're current goes right here. I will tell you that a best practice as a listing agent is the minute you know that you are going to have this listing signed. Try to gather all of the property owners association information so you have the contact. As soon as the listing agreement is signed, I think as an agent, you should be ordering the package. You should have the package come to you. You should be reviewing it. You should have it prior to going on the market so that as soon as you are ratified, you may deliver it so that you do not have buyers with get out of jail free cards while you're negotiating appraisals or home inspection. That is just a best practice. All right, property condition. This is the D4 disclosure. So D4 disclosure is what we talked about yesterday, right? What does the seller and buyer have to understand about their rights and obligations? This says that the seller acknowledges that the buyer or the broker has informed them of their rights and obligations under the act. Well, there's another document that we give them that we've informed them of their rights and obligations. Are they exempt? Yes or no? The only time that someone is exempt from the D4 Disclosure Act is if it is a estate that is being managed. So the executor is someone who has no knowledge of the property whatsoever. If it's a foreclosure, if it is a court-ordered sale like a bankruptcy that again is being handled by a trustee that has no knowledge of the property itself, all right, that is it for exemptions. If you have an estate where the executor is the spouse or the child, and maybe the child grew up in the house or the spouse lived in the house, they're not exempt from the act because they have knowledge of the property. A home owned in a trust does not qualify for the exemption, okay? The exemption is only for people who are the representative for the sale that could have no knowledge of the condition of the property and how it relates to the act. It further goes on to say that the seller acknowledges that the broker is required to disclose to prospective buyers all material adverse facts pertaining to the physical condition of the property, although we're not required to discover it. So this, again, it's reminding the sellers of our responsibility that the seller doesn't have to, but we have to. So we're gonna just make sure that we have those conversations. Lead-based paint. If the property was constructed before 1978, so that means if it was built in 1978, it does not apply. The construction date has to be December 31st, 1977 or earlier. Okay? In 1978, it does not apply. So you have to check yes or no. If it was built in 77, 76, 52, 34, whatever, then you would check what were, right, constructed, and there's an additional disclosure that we have to provide for lead-based paint. Am I going too fast? You guys good? Okay. Current liens. This is a very important section. We should be having a conversation with our clients before we fill this in and send it to them. It's asking is if they have mortgages on the property. If they don't have a mortgage, then you would mark property is not encumbered by any mortgage, and then you skip all the way down to G. If they do have a mortgage, then you're going to fill in the information. Who's their first trust lien holder? Do they have a second trust, or do they have a line of credit? We need to know that information. Are they current on all their payments? Seller is not in default for any of the liens above, right? So are they behind on their payments? We need to know that. G says there are no liens secured against the property for federal, state, or local income tax, unpaid real estate, property taxes, or condo or HOA fees, or special assessments. Yes, that's important, right? Because HOAs can put liens on properties, and they can put liens on properties for some of those violations that we talked about from the disclosure package. So it's very important for us to know. Judgments against the seller. So judgments, if it's not owned by husband and wife and tenants by the entirety, that can be an issue. And bankruptcy. So if any of these things down here are not checked, if any of these are blank, it's going to be an alert to me to say, hey, wait a minute, we might not be able to list this property because certain things that fall in these categories would prohibit us from listing the property. So these are conversations we need to have with our clients. Okay?
Hey, Shannon, I have a quick question.
Yes.
So can you still list a property that has a lien on it?
Depending on the lien, you can, if there will be enough proceeds to pay the lien off at closing and it can be recorded and released properly, then yes.
Okay.
But if the lien exceeds what the proceeds are and their ability to pay, then it gets complicated. And that's what a short sale is, right? A short sale is a situation where the lien on the property is more than what's owed. And so the seller is asking the bank to release the lien for less money than is what's owed.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Seller financing, we don't do a lot of seller financing here. But this is where you would acknowledge whether the seller is doing seller financing. This happens in rural areas or unique properties where the buyers can't get traditional financing. Closing costs. Seller's estimated cost of settlement. We are not going to go over this form, but there is a worksheet that you can provide your sellers. I suggest you provide your sellers. I have one that's a spreadsheet that I can show you guys this week that is where I give my clients 3 different options, right? If it sells for this price, this is what your proceeds are. If it sells for this price, this is what your proceeds are, et cetera, so that they're prepared ahead of time before we go on the market. They know where their comfort level is based on what the offers are that would come in. Okay?
2 questions, 2 quick questions.
Yes.
So the seller's estimated cost of settlement form, we should always attach that and check that it is attached?
Only if you do it. Only if you give
Only if you
them
do
this.
it.
Yeah. And if you
Okay.
do it and it's attached, then you need to submit it in command. Okay.
Okay. Okay. And then the second question was, where is that form?
There is a version of it in the NVAR form stocks.
Okay.
That you can also get one from UT's website. You can make one. You can make one from the MLS. I have a spreadsheet that I created. So there's lots of different ones, but there is a document called the seller's estimated cost of settlement in the NVAR docs.
Okay. Thank you.
All right.
Chadwick, come on down.
So I was going to give you guys, I had a plan today to only keep you guys until now because of it being a team meeting day. And our discussion got way too long for me to be able to let you guys go now for team meetings and feel like we've accomplished anything. So what I'd like to do is to give you guys a couple-minute break because we've been talking for a long time. And then let's come back and we will not be able to get into the team meetings right away, but hopefully we can get through the rest of what we need to. And Fredericksburg's team meetings is at noon. Falls Church is at 11, but you guys will be able to pop in hopefully a little late to that. So it's 10:58. Let's take a 6-minute stretch break and come back and we'll start on, we'll pick back up right here at page 9 and we'll knock out the rest of what we have, okay? All right. 11:04. See you guys in a few minutes.
and sit there and write.
Hey Shannon, can I ask you a question very quickly?
Sure.
Okay. When someone is looking to rent, should one of the first things that I ask them would be for a copy of their credit score? Or should you even ask that?
So tomorrow is our rental day.
Oh, okay. Okay, cool. Perfect.
So not that I don't want to answer your question.
Yeah, no, I got it. I got it. I'll wait for tomorrow.
Yeah. So what I will say is that tomorrow we're going to go over the tenant consultation, and one of the best ways to get that information is by reviewing the application with
Gotcha.
them. So it keeps you from asking certain people different questions, right? That could be perceived as violating fair housing and things like that. You're always going to be going through certain questions, and by reviewing the application with them during your tenant consultation, you will be able to get an idea of if there's anything you need to know before you take them out.
Okay, gotcha. Thank you.
Yeah, but I would not ask directly what's your credit score.
No, gotcha.
We'll have a different script for you tomorrow.
Thank you.
Good question. All right, guys, it's 11. Yes.
Yeah, real quick question too. Can I call you later on today? I am potentially going to purchase my rental condo, and I just have some questions on how to work that out, because this is something that will probably not go on the MLS at all. It's just going to be a deal, and I just want to know how that works with our situation and the brokerage and all that business.
You may. Absolutely.
Okay, appreciate it. Thanks.
All right, guys, it's 11:05 now. I want to get back into the documents. I would like to say to you guys that I I hope that the additional discussions that we're having outside of what the contract and documents say is helpful to you guys. I know that we have gotten a little off topic and not been able to move as quickly as we did yesterday. And part of that I take responsibility for, because I like having these discussions, right? I like having the real life talks, because I want you to be able to take the real life information examples into your real life activities. So I definitely will appreciate feedback that you guys have today, because it's a little different than what we had yesterday. And at the same time, I want to make sure that we get through what the documents actually say, and that we're concentrating on the purpose of today's class, which is how to fill out the listing agreement and what it is that we're talking to our clients about during that listing consultation. Okay, so if you guys are okay with me jumping back in, we're gonna try to get through a little quicker the rest of the documents, and then we can talk about what we need to as far as real life discussions. Is that okay with everybody? Awesome, thank you guys. All right, here we go. We were at the section where it talked about seller proceeds. So this is just a little disclosure, if you will, that the seller acknowledges that their proceeds might not be available right at the time of settlement. Virginia is a wet settlement state, and so what that means is that the transaction occurs and is completed when essentially the ink is wet on the signatures, but it still has to be recorded before the proceeds can be distributed. Okay, so there's a lot of different technicalities that go in. Usually within 48 hours is of when it's recorded, is when the seller's proceeds are going to be distributed. So it's fairly quick, but it's just telling the sellers, hey, you're not going to get a check right at the settlement table in Virginia. However, the sale has occurred. IRS and FIRPTA, we talked a little bit about this yesterday, where the seller needs to tell you whether they are considered as a foreign person as defined by FIRPTA, okay? And this is because of the tax implications and withholdings that could be required, and that has to be disclosed to buyers. The seller's representations, so what they're telling you here is that by signing this agreement, they have the capacity to convey good and marketable title by general warranty deed, okay? So they're disclosing again and saying, hey, I'm actually the owner, and we don't have clouds on title that we're aware of. That's what they're saying there. The seller is saying that they are not under a listing agreement with another brokerage. It's very important. And that they are not under contract with someone else to sell the property to someone else, or that someone else has an interest in purchasing this property. The seller has to disclose whether they are licensed, active or inactive as an agent, and that is, they have to disclose that. It doesn't matter what state it is, inactive or active, okay? The seller has knowledge or no knowledge of existence, removal, or abandonment of underground storage tanks. Is it tenant occupied? That's very important, because a lease is a lien on the property that automatically conveys. So if you have a property that you are listing that has a tenant in it and there's a lease, you can do that, but the tenant goes with the property. It's not automatic that the tenant has to move out when the property is sold. The lease carries over to the new owner. And then the seller is disclosing whether they have a recording system in the property. Okay, this is important too, because if there are video cameras or audio recording devices, then that needs to be disclosed in our MLS. Access to the property. The seller needs to provide access to us to get into the property to do our job, right? And also the seller is allowing the broker's unlicensed assistants access to the property as well. So generally what this means, as a listing agent, I'm going to get 2 copies of keys to the property. I'm going to get 1 copy that goes in the lockbox, and then I'm going to keep 1 copy in a lockbox that I have secure somewhere else with the keys to my listings, right? And what that allows is for me to send my unlicensed assistant to maybe go put brochures in or pick up cards from a showing or set up for an open house or something like that. Okay, that's what that's authorizing. Your unlicensed assistant is not using your central lock card. Assumption of risk. Okay, this is important. The seller has to retain full responsibility for the property until it settles, right? And actually, even a couple of days after, there's a period of time until it's recorded where both the buyer and seller have this concurrent ownership and this concurrent responsibility. I'm not going to get into details about that, but just know it exists. So the seller retains full responsibility for the property, including all utilities, maintenance, physical security, and liability until title to property is transferred to the buyer. Okay, what this means, they have to keep the utilities on through and including the day of closing. Okay, so the buyer can have it turned into their name the next day if they want. It has to be through and including the day of closing. They have to keep homeowners insurance, hazard insurance on the property. And they actually should be keeping that hazard insurance on the property until if they have a loan on the property until it's paid off. It's really when they should keep it on. They need to make sure that they understand anything that happens to the home during the listing period is their responsibility. So we talked about this, situation where if a buyer comes in yesterday to a home and they get hurt, whose responsibility is it? Well, it falls under the homeowner's insurance, right? As an invited guest into the home. This says broker is not responsible for the security of the property or for inspecting the property on a periodic basis. We have many agents that take this responsibility and they say, oh, I'll go check on your property for you. It's a wonderful thing for you to do for your clients. And at the same time, you have to have an explicit conversation that while you might be going to check on the property for them, you are not responsible. What if you forget? What if something happened in between the times that you were there, right? What if you went and checked and everything looked fine and then something wasn't fine, right? You do not take that responsibility on yourself. If the property is vacant, the seller needs to contact their homeowner's insurance company. And this says request a vacancy clause to cover the property. The homeowner's insurance company will understand what the vacancy clause is if that's what they talk about. It's a different kind of insurance policy for coverage for vacant properties. Super important if you have a vacant listing that they do this. The next section talks about the use of the broker services and facilities and any, MLS and any parent companies and association of realtors, and basically like removes all of our liabilities from things that happen, from things that are outside of our control, right? It doesn't remove liability for us for things that are within our control. It's a lot of words to say that, and sometimes it scares clients if they read it. But basically, if there's anything that's outside of our control, we're being held harmless. That's what all of those words say. Provision. So this is very similar to yesterday, right? Appropriate professional advice, service provider referrals, wire fraud. Those were all in the buyer agency agreement, talking about being careful, going to getting multiple referrals, doing their due diligence, verifying things from appropriate professionals, right? We are not home inspectors. We are not accountants. We are not attorneys. So they need to gather the appropriate advice as they see fit.
Shannon, I have a couple of questions before you continue on. One was going back to getting 2 sets of keys. Is there any reason why you wouldn't give a 1-day code to enter the Sentry Lock for the people that are helping you, you're non-licensed?
Yeah, one-day codes for central lock are not really meant for the case of your unlicensed assistant to be going
Okay.
in. And a lot of the associations don't even like one-day codes. They didn't offer them for a long time. Central lock is meant for agents and affiliates that have central lock access. That's what
Okay.
central lock is for.
Okay.
Yep.
The other question I had is you were talking about keeping the utilities on. I have a situation that we're going to closing on the same day for a listing and for the home that they're buying. So how do we do that? How do they maintain utilities in one location and turn on utilities at the other home? Because it's same day closing. So the seller of the home that they're purchasing has accepted assignment of funds. So how do I guide my client?
Yeah, it's two separate accounts. It's not a transfer of one account to the other.
Okay.
It's two separate accounts. So they can do it. They just need to call.
Okay. In my mind, we are transferring. So, okay, perfect. Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, we were on subsequent offers after contract acceptance. So after the contract has been ratified, this says that broker recommends seller obtain legal advice prior to acceptance of a subsequent offer. So what that means is not in the case of ratifying as a backup, right? That's in the case where a seller thinks that they want to kick out a bona fide offer that's already in place because something comes in that's better. Okay, that's not talking about backups. Governing law, of course, we're governed by the Commonwealth of Virginia, and that this agreement is binding once all parties sign, and that means sellers and broker. The attorney fee section is the same as yesterday that we talked about, and this is also going to be similar to what's in our contract. Documents that say whoever is the prevailing party in the event of an issue gets their attorney fees, excuse me, covered. It's a lot of words to say that. Okay. All right. That's it on this. Does everyone feel like they have a better understanding now of what goes in the listing agreement and why in these sections?
Definitely.
Okay, awesome. ABA and cybersecurity we went over yesterday. We're not going to go over those again today. The long form on the D4 disclosure, we are not going over again today. I will just point out to you that the reason we require it for the seller is because one of the pages of the document says sellers right here, and buyers may need to complete one or more of the following disclosures. So there is something appropriate here for the sellers, and our one-page D4 disclosure, right? The one-pager talks about being advised of their rights and responsibilities. So we'll start here at the legal description and property address. I cannot tell you how many times I see this document come through and it just has the address. So this is another one of those situations where it says property address / legal description. So we want both. So you're going to type the property address and you're going to pull the legal description from the tax record, and that's going to go here on this line. This next section for the seller says the owner has been provided all their notifications, right, under the Property Disclosure Act, and if represented by a real estate licensee, they further acknowledge having been informed of their rights and obligations under the Act. Many agents don't know what the clients are actually signing here. So the reason that we have the D4 long form is because then our sellers can sign this and actually be telling the truth, that they have been given the information on their rights and obligations. It's the same thing for the buyers. The buyers are actually signing right here, saying that they are further acknowledging they've been informed of their rights and obligations. So that's why we give them the D4 long form prior to going into entering any offers, right? We do it during the agency consultation. So this document here from the seller. It has to be signed by the seller first because it's a disclosure coming from the seller to the buyer. And it would be accompanied by any of the required disclosures that the seller would have to give under this page. So if there were pending building code or zoning violations, there is an additional one-page form that gets signed. So it would be that long one-page form that talks about what the disclosure is that they have to provide, plus this document.
Blake, just heard the coffee machine go off. Some fresh.
Who do I need to mute?
Prepared for it? Okay.
All right, awesome. Any questions on the D4 disclosure? We good? Am I going too fast?
Yes, excuse me. I guess I'd like to know where are the other disclosures, for example, the permit disclosure?
They are in your NVAR forms library in DocuSign, and they are in on the D4 website directly if you want to go there, but they are all in DocuSign.
So this would be the form that we would submit if we had a seller that have a property and there's no permit for the basement or for a bedroom or whatever.
Not just because there's no permit. It's only if the seller has been notified by the county of pending building code or zoning ordinance violations. So not just because you know that there isn't a permit, it's only if they've been notified by the county that there's pending enforcement coming or that the county wants to do something about it.
Got it, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely, good question. All right, useful information about real estate transactions we went over yesterday. So we will not go over that again. Okay, lead-based paint disclosure. All right, this document is for the homes that were built prior to 1978. And what happens, this is similar to the D4 disclosure, that this is signed by the sellers up front, and it is a disclosure provided from the sellers to the buyers prior to ratification. So this would go in your document section of Bright, ideally, with the D4 disclosure. They are going to initial whether they know that there is a presence of lead-based paint, that they know of it, and they're going to write about it, or that they have no knowledge of it. Okay, so they initial here and they check one of these. So either they know about it and what they tell about what it is, or they have no knowledge of any information. Okay, so they have to initial up here. Then they go to B and they have to initial B, and then they're going to check one. Either they have records that they've provided or there are no records. All right. Section B is then for the purchaser, when the offer is made, for the purchaser to acknowledge that they have had an opportunity to review copies of any information listed above, if any, that they've received the Protect Your Home from Lead pamphlet, which as an agent you would provide. And then the purchaser has either received the opportunity to do a risk assessment or has waived the risk assessment.
Shannon.
What was the question?
For this one, when it says purchaser has received and had an opportunity to review copies and all information listed above. That is if they have provided something beside whatever it says here in the first part in the seller's area.
Right, if they've provided information, then the purchaser has received the information that they've talked about up here, that they have provided. But if they have no reports, then there's nothing for them to provide.
Yeah, because it was some kind of discussion in Zoom once when people said that saying if the seller has checked, if the seller has checked, seller has provided the purchase with all available records and reports. Then when it says here, purchaser has received and had an opportunity to review all copies and information listed above. Some of them say that I should press here, initial here. And I was thinking that unless they physically provide me with some forms, then I should, or else I'm not.
If they've marked that there's known lead-based paint hazards, then you would really want the purchaser to have gotten information about that. But if they say no, that there's no known knowledge and there's no reports, then nothing would go on that first line.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, absolutely. And then the sales associates both have to initial here. One initials on this side, one initials on this side, right? Listing agent's going to initial first with their seller, and then the buyer's agent is going to initial here when their buyer does, and the buyer's agent's going to sign over here, acknowledging that they have that they're aware of their duties and that they have informed their clients properly. Okay, easy. Listing amendment. This one document is for any changes to the listing agreement, if we are withdrawing the listing, if we're taking a temp off, if we're canceling it. So it says this agreement is made on whatever date, so whatever date, and you could have multiple listing amendments, right? Because if you're changing your price multiple times, there can be multiple listing amendments that you have associated with one agreement. This is valid for our exclusive right to sell listing agreement. We don't do agency, exclusive agency. So you would never use that. Exclusive right to sell unimproved land. So this would be the same amendment that you would use with the land listing agreement or with the lease listing agreement. You put in the date for what the listing agreement date was, and you put the seller's name and the broker's name, of course, and then you put the property address. What this says is that we're modifying the original listing agreement based on these terms. Now, just remember that addendums supersede any previous addendum. So if you have multiple of these listing amendments, they supersede any previous listing amendments, okay? So if you're changing the listing price, you would use this document. You're extending the listing period. You're changing the on the market date for when you're going to the MLS. If you're changing something different, sometimes I'll see maybe compensation or conveyances or something goes in other. Temp off, if you're changing the status of the listing in Bright to temporarily off the market, you would need this document. Withdrawing from the MLS versus cancellation. So I'd like to talk about these two for a second. A withdrawn listing in the MLS means that the listing agreement itself has not been terminated, but the seller has decided that they no longer wish to have the home marketed and they do not want it advertised, but they're still bound by the terms of the listing agreement. And that would be withdrawn. So if you are calling withdrawns and expireds and in the MLS, you don't want to call withdrawns because withdrawns are going to still be under a brokerage relationship. Cancellations mean we are letting the client out completely. They are free to go do whatever they want based on whatever the terms are, right? So if there's an early termination fee, they'd have to pay the fee in order to be let out. Maybe there's no termination fee. We're just letting them cancel, whatever it is. And in that case, in Bright, it would be marked as a canceled listing. Canceled listings you can call because there's no more brokerage relationship. The reason all of these things are listed on here as options is because the seller and broker have to sign, and email is not enough to effectively make changes to the listing agreement, because remember, it only went into place once the seller and broker have signed. So everything has to be done in writing here.
May I ask a question?
Sure.
In regards to this. So I had a situation where I was a buyer agent, and I'm sorry, my husband and daughter are up here. So we were waiting for it to go on the market. It never did. It came on the MLS as temporarily off market.
Okay.
And within 4 hours, she put it for sale. And within a day, she got 4 offers, including ours. And when she, then she put it on temporarily off market again as per the request of her client. So she says, is that all like, did she have to fill out this form every time she did that?
Well, I mean, technically, it could have been directed in the listing agreement that the home would be put in temp off status once offers are received for a period of time to review and then changed, right? So that direction could have been put in the additional terms on how that was going to be handled. But if it was just discussions like, oh, we got 10 offers and we really need to stop the showing so that we can review it, then yes, technically, this document would need to be signed every time there's a status change like that. That's a good question. What other questions do you guys have about this document? So this is something that you might see me send you a note in command if I have signed a listing agreement, and then I realize once you submit it to me in command, when I review the tax record, that there's something that doesn't match. I might say, please complete a listing amendment to correct blah, 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 right? Because I'm not there. If I've already signed it, then it's probably enforceable enough if we get this listing agreement signed. There are certain cases, like we talked about, where if there's a listing agreement that has no price or no expiration date, or something's really wonky with it, where I'm not going to sign it. I'm just going to send it back to you. But if I've signed it, in most cases, I'm not going to make the client re-sign the whole thing if we can achieve what we need to via this listing amendment. Okay.
Hey, Shannon, I got real quick. Are we, so in a situation where we have multiple amendments, are we redlining or are we just doing a new sheet every time? What's the best practice?
Well, it would have to be a clean sheet every time.
Okay.
Right? You would have one. Okay. So what I think,
like if I change the list price from 600 to 550, then to 520, you know what I mean? Like, when we just, like, am I using a new sheet every time, or am I striking the previous list price, initialing, and then just using the same form?
No, good question. And this is a mistake that's commonly made. Once a document is ratified, meaning all parties have signed and it's executed, it cannot be changed. So that's why we have listing agreement amendments. That's why we have sales contract addendums. That's why we have all of these additional supplements, because as soon as you go back and make a change to an already ratified document, it unratifies the document. So you never want to go back and change something. And so that's why if I get a listing agreement that needs a change, I won't say just go back and change it on the listing agreement and have everybody initial, because then it kills the first version, right? I'm going to say do it on an amendment. And that's the same thing with a sales contract. If I see something that needs to be corrected, I'm going to send a note that says do a sales contract addendum to correct it. So we never go back and change something that's already been executed. Now, if there is a situation where it's not fully ratified. So let's say the seller has signed, but I have not signed, and you could mark it up and have everybody initial, right? So you could have the seller initial the change, and you could have me initial the change, and then sign it and ratify it, and that's okay. But once everybody has signed it and it's complete, we don't change it.
Got it. Okay. And then one other quick question, and maybe this is for a different session, but could you maybe talk a little bit about like the days on market counts and the statuses and what resets what, and what sometimes you'll see somebody kind of withdraw it or go temp off, and then the days on market, there's two, it's like number/number in MLS. If you could just clarify that real quick. Thanks.
Yep, real quick, I will. Yep. Days on market is in a DOM and DOMP. So days on market is for the current MLS listing, and DOMP, days on market for the property, is anything that hasn't been reset. If it is in withdrawn or canceled status, it will start to reset for you to be able to put a new MLS number in. On the 61st day, it will reset to 0 for the days on market. If you are in active or active under contract status, the days will continue because you are actively marketing the home. When it goes to pending, you will stop accruing days. And if it's in temporarily off the market, you will stop accruing days. Okay, so if it's an active or active under contract, you're going to continue to accrue days. Pending and temp off will pause the accrual of days on market. And if you are taking it off the market completely, withdrawn or canceled requires to the 61st day before those days reset, and you could put it back on with 0 days on market to a new listing.
With a brand new listing for the property.
Yep.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
All right. Sure. Okay. Listing information sheet. This is an awesome tool that was provided to us last year from NVAR's Forms Committee. And this is something that I encourage all of you to be filling out and adding to the form section of Bright with your disclosures. This is direction to buyer's agents on how to fill out their offer for you. I encourage you to look for these documents when you're preparing offers for your clients to see if the seller information sheet is provided.
Does this go on the MLS when you put all the disclosures if you're a listing agent?
Yes.
Look this up. Yes. Okay. And it's new, right?
It's about a year, almost a year old.
Oh, it's for them to get all your information correct. Okay.
That's right. Okay, so this is telling the buyer's agent how to submit a clean offer to you. Okay, this is the best way to do it. So you're filling in information that you already received from the main part of the listing agreement. Okay, it's filling in the conveyances. It's filling in your listing brokerage information because it might be really hard for the buyer's agent to go look up all this information. But I tell you what, when it's complete as a buyer's agent and you fill in all the listing broker's information, it makes you look good. It makes you look really good that you filled in this document completely. Seller's preferred title, company, and timing. And all of that information is here. It's giving you information to help the buyer to present a good offer for your client to not waste anyone's time. So I encourage you to use this. I'm not going to go into it in detail because it's all just a carryover from the document that we used before, but this is a tool that I encourage you to use in your listings. Okay, that's all I wanted to show you today. Questions, comments, ahas, and then I'm going to let Falls Church agents go to their team meeting for the last few minutes, and then Fredericksburg, you guys have your team meeting at noon.
Shannon, I have a quick question, and I might have missed it, regarding the compensation under the broker, the cooperating broker. There's another line that says other compensation. Could you go back to it? And I might have missed it. What is the other compensation? What does that apply to?
Yeah, I'll show you guys what that is. Other compensation would be if it was for, let me pull it up for you here. It used to say non-agency compensation, so it would be in a situation where it was like not someone representing the buyer, but just the sub-agency, right? Other compensation here, it does not apply for us in really any case. We're only offering compensation if it's a buyer's representative, a true representative. So NA would go there. Okay, but they combined where it used to say sub-agency and non-agency on the old agreement, and I really don't even know, I don't know why they did it as other, because we really don't have other. It's compensation that we're offering to buyers.
So this is in case, let's say, if we are offering 6% the total, and for the buyer agency compensation, we are offering 3%. And suddenly appear that some buyer came with no representation, can we put their other compensation 3% at the point that we can get the 6% whole with not necessary, we have to go through dual agency?
Well, you automatically get it.
Okay. But
It's
I can still put that 3% just in case, to clarify.
Well, 3% goes here on buyer agency, but it says that we're only offering the 3% if there's a buyer's agent. But if there's not a buyer's agent, that full 6% still comes in that scenario.
Could this be used where I have seen in some listings that says, if you bring a buyer, you get an additional, for example, 2,000 or 1,000. Is that where they go? I have seen some listings.
Yeah, that doesn't go in other. So what would happen there is if there's a bonus being offered, the total would say 6% plus $2,000, or it would say the total of 6%, and if the 2,000 is coming out of the listing agent's half, basically. If down here in buyer agency compensation, you would put 3% plus $2,000.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Right, see, this is an or right here, buyer agency or other compensation. So we're not using the or piece, we're not using the other, we're just using the buyer agency compensation. Good question. All right, what else? Anything else for you guys today?
I have an aha. I really appreciate the verbiage you use to summarize each paragraph. That help us to, because it's a lot of very technical, wording that sometimes clients don't understand. And when you summarize and tell us what's going on with that paragraph, help us to really understand better and maybe use it for sellers or buyer presentations.
Good, good. I'm glad, and that is one of the goals that I have in doing this is trying. I joke, and I hope it doesn't offend anyone, but I joke that I'm translating it to English, right? Because even though English is my first language, right? It's hard for me. Mm-hmm. In some cases, right? It's hard for clients to understand what some of this legalese is and all of these extra words to really accomplish what we can say in a sentence, right? And so I do appreciate those of you that are working extra hard, that it isn't, right, your first language. Veronica, you said you mentioned it earlier, right? It's hard for you, and I completely appreciate that. So I hope that these discussions where we sort of change the script a little bit, right, where we don't have to just read what it says, we're just explaining what it says. And at the same time, we have to internalize it, right? We have to truly understand what it says in order for us to explain it that way.
Right. And can I say something? Oh, real quick. Sure. I actually have been an ESL teacher for a really long time. So if anybody needs any help, and just with English, and not so much the legal stuff, but just reach out to me. So just thought I'd say that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I appreciate that. I appreciate that. Thank you, Giovanna, for your kind words. I appreciate that. I appreciate your support being on this.
Shannon, I have only one request. I don't know if you read my email. I know I asked too much, but because my printer is broke. So what happened is I am not able to follow some. I need to see on actually computer because I'm not able to print. So if you can give like a file before, I'm able to go to the office or whatever to print. Would be very nice for me, so I'm able to see, because I'm a very paper person.
Yeah, and as I mentioned yesterday morning, I'm trying to get the materials out to you as early as possible. I'm glad I'm getting to teach with you guys, and yet I have many long days when I don't have the teaching, and so I'm getting them to you out as early as I can.
So
thank you so much. I really appreciate.
What I'm doing is I'm using two computers, and in one computer I'm able to edit the PDF format. So I'm taking notes while I listen to you. So sometimes you're gonna say that I'm looking at a different place, but I'm taking notes on my PDF format to be able to, gather all the information.
Yeah, I don't have two computers.
Oh.
So hopefully it will be before 7 o'clock tonight that I get the materials out to you for tomorrow.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank
all right.
you. Lindsay.
Sure. Last minute questions or ahas before
Yes,
you go?
I have one. When are we going to do this boot camp again?
I believe it's on the schedule in March. I'll have to check.
Yeah.
March, Deb. Thank you. Thank you, Deb. Yep.
Thank you.
Yes.
Shannon, one real quick question. On the broker information sheet that you provided yesterday, right on the top sheet, I noticed on the listing broker information on the optional sheet, it does say Virginia firm license, and that's not on that. Is that on our licenses or is it not? It is, okay. Good.
It is.
Answer my question.
All right. Anything last minute? Going one?
Since you are home, how do I best reach you since you're not at the office?
Everybody can always reach me on my cell phone.
Okay, will you give that number out?
Sure, 703-869-6488.
Okay, super, thank you.
Absolutely. All right, for those of you in Falls Church, pop over to the help desk and we'll finish with the team meeting there. And Fredericksburg, I will see you at noon on your team meeting. And the rest of you, we'll see you tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. back here.
Thank you, Shannon.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Shannon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Shannon.
Thanks, Shannon.
Shannon, when is the best time to reach you?